Hey everyone, my name is Alfred and I'm a PM at Microsoft. I currently work within the Azure Compute product group. And today I'll be talking to you about customer conversations and how PMs get the most value from customer data. Now, before we dive in, I may be a corporate drone at Microsoft, but I'm allowed to have my own freedom of thought. So views that I share within this presentation are indeed my own. So, I'll be talking to you guys about some examples from my own work, and everything that I say about it is just my own thoughts and not thoughts of Microsoft. Now, diving right in, first point, why do we talk to customers? It might seem obvious that you as a PM should talk to customers, but sometimes you just need that slight nudge when you're on the fence about whether you should reach out and talk to a specific customer. So I'll give you some reasons that you should be talking to customers as a PM. The first one, I guess it is fairly obvious. It's part of the job. It's a very important aspect of a product manager's job. In fact, I'd argue it's the most important aspect. Every PM job description will probably contain something like you should be the voice of the customer, or you should bring the customer's perspective to the engineering team, or something like that. And then the question becomes, how do you actually get to become that trusted voice of the customer and build that credibility with your developers, with your stakeholders? Well, you talk to those customers. The second reason why you should be talking to customers is that it helps build customer empathy. So when you reach out to customers, they'll describe use cases, they'll describe their problems, you'll get to hear about them firsthand, of course, and you'll get to have a dialogue with the customers back and forth. The customers also bring that end-to-end view of not just your product, but how it fits into their work, into their whole environment. You'll understand kind of their dependencies that they might have on other teams. So instead of just focusing on your specific product and your specific solution, customers will help you bring that whole end-to-end perspective into conversations with your stakeholders. So you can bring that back to your developers, and it's far more credible to talk to a dev with a direct customer scenario than trying to just cover your bases with maybe generic, almost hypothetical situations. Another important reason to talk to customers is to validate the hypotheses that you might have. As a product manager, you'll always be wondering how customers use your product. And this is just a side effect of having to scale your customer knowledge. You can't just sit behind every single customer that uses your product as much as you'd love to and peek over their shoulder and see how they're using it. You have to scale that knowledge to orders and orders of magnitude more than that. And one way of scaling that customer knowledge is coming up with hypotheses and looking to prove or disprove them. And the kind of indirect effects of validating or disproving your hypotheses is that it allows you to iterate quickly and fail fast. I mean, these are terms that are thrown around a lot these days. We have to iterate on our product and we have to fail fast. But validating these hypotheses really helps you do that. It helps you build confidence in product market fit, making sure that you're actually building the right thing, that there's a market for your product, that people actually want to solve their problems with something that you built. And then, of course, having that confidence in product market fit and having that evidence from either proven or disproved hypothesis helps you show that you're building the right thing to either, your engineers, your other stakeholders, or even investors. So you can show them that, hey, you're backing the right thing here. I guess as a quick example from my own work, we're always trying to get new heads assigned to our project. So, hey, we want more devs. And, in doing so, we have to make the right case that, hey, we have product market fit. We're building something that people are using. And then, the final point of why talk to customers, it feels good. For all of the customers that come up to you and share maybe negative feedback, like, oh, your product doesn't do this, why not? Or your product broke my setup when I tried to install it, or how do you expect me to use this? It's so difficult. There will always be someone out there that has a problem that your product solves, and they totally make it all worth it when you find them. My personal experience when running into these people is, they know your product really, really well, sometimes even better than you as the product manager. And because of that, they'll have super insightful feedback and end-to-end experiences that you can then listen to and bring back to your devs or stakeholders and have an even deeper discussion about. There's nothing quite like the feeling of some customer giving you a demo of your own product to solve something that you've never thought about before. And that's, one of the fulfilling things about talking to customers. That kind of begs the question, who are your customers? So once you've decided that you do want to talk to customers, and the challenge is figuring out who these people are. And the question of customer identification also comes up a fair amount in PM interviews. So I think it's worth touching on it a little bit here. If you're looking to break into product management from another field, know that your customers don't always have to fall in the traditional definition of a customer. They don't have to be people that pay to use your product or feature. They can be anyone that consumes your output. If you're in consulting, a customer could definitely be the client that you're providing recommendations to. If you're working, right now, maybe as a DevOps engineer, building and maintaining a pipeline of some sort, your customer would be the devs that use your pipeline to build projects and provide feedback on that. If you're currently in like an internal IT role, maintaining internal services for other teams, then your customers could definitely be the other teams that you work with and consume those services that you build and provide for them. And if you're currently in like a PM role where you're working with internal customer teams that ultimately maybe build a product that is used by external customers, both those parties, the internal team and the external customers can be considered your customers. But the team that's also consuming your work, they'll definitely have opinions and feedback about the problems that you can solve. So they're definitely customers of yours. So let's say, you've identified your customers, you want to talk to the customers. What do you do next? Well, you try to get time with them. And this is another potential challenge that PMs face on the job. I've also found that it pops up a little bit in the PM interview process. Like sometimes people will ask, hey, how do you validate a product hypothesis with customers? And kind of the implicit question here is, how would you find and reach new customers? So I'll give you a couple or a few different thoughts on that. First one, from my own experience, I found that field and sales teams can be fairly easy to, get you in contact with customers. Often they have established customer relationships that they look after, and you can pretty easily ask them to put you in touch with their customers. They're usually happy to do so because that gives them an opportunity to further build the relationship that they currently have with their customer. And then, of course, it gives you as the PM direct customer face time, and you can then ask your questions and get your feedback and whatnot. So that's one way. But what if you don't have the luxury of having a large sales force at your company to work with? Another thing that I found is community is super, super helpful here. This is where it really comes into play. This can happen a lot for open source products where the community is key to a product. From a PM perspective, a strong community ultimately leads to higher defensibility in your product, which helps retain and potentially monetize your customers. So investing time in building out a community and reaching out to people in the community for that feedback and asking them to say, hey, do you have some time to chat with me for some feedback? That's that's one great way of also getting time with customers. Another way that I found is through support cases. So what I've actually done on a few occasions at Microsoft here is if I'm learning and if I'm interested in learning about how a specific aspect of my product or service is being used, I can look for support cases related to it. And then once I found those support cases, I can either analyze them or, reach out to the customers in the support case. Of course, staying in line with any kind of privacy requirements that Microsoft adheres to. But I say something like, "Hey, I'm reaching out to you today because I see you're using this specific feature, or had some feedback on it. I'd love to get some direct FaceTime with you, and would you like to hop on a 30-minute call?" What I found is actually customers really love it when the direct product team reaches out to them and says, "Hey, I want to listen to you and hear your feedback," and they're usually very receptive to this kind of tactic. And this final point, I kind of saved it at the end because it's a little bit iffy, and I'll kind of explain why. When a customer signs up to use your product, often they sign up with their emails and whatnot, and that's obviously one potential way of reaching out to a customer. The concern is obviously being mindful of privacy and spam considerations, but let's suppose that you've solved for those problems and you can comfortably do direct customer reach outs. That's another great way of getting time with customers is you find out how to contact them via email or whatnot, and then you reach out to them. And one thing I'll say here is wording that makes them feel, I guess, special, may help increase the rate of their responses. So if you say something like, I'm reaching out to a small number of customers to get feedback, you might get more responses than if you had said, hey, want to give me feedback. So, just something to keep in mind. There's a few different ways of potentially getting time with those customers and reaching out to them and trying to set stuff up. So now you have their attention, and they want to spend time with you, and they want to, talk to you about their feedback. Now, what do you do? I'll share with you guys some tips and tricks for getting that feedback from customers. And the first one, on this slide, I suppose it's fairly obvious. Just you have to be prepared. Preparation is super, super key to this. You have to know what you want from the customer before you go into the meeting. You have to prepare questions, have your own hypotheses ready for, trying to prove or disprove them. You have to understand their customer, try to understand their perspective as well. If you can, do some research on their business and their industry. And one piece of advice I've received is that when you step into a meeting, the meeting in your head should already be over. Like you should already know kind of what you want to get out of it and where you want to take it and how that meeting might be navigated in dialogue between you and the customer. So that's something to keep in mind. Preparation is super, super key. You can't really over prepare for a customer meeting. And so that's, I guess that's fairly obvious. So I'll share another one on this slide. Understand that how you word a question will impact how it's answered. So I've got two questions on the slide here. I've got one, which is, what are some problems you currently face in managing your infrastructure versus, do you have problems with backup, security, or updates? The first one is more useful if you're trying to, fish out for potential areas that you might look into and spend some time investigating as a point of friction for customers. And the second one is potentially more useful if you have, if you've already ascertained that backup, security, or updates are areas that you want to focus on. So depending on how you word a question, the customer will answer it in different ways, and that can potentially guide your conversation into a different direction than what you might be expecting. When I was preparing for this session, I was also asking a couple of my other PM colleagues about other tips and tricks they might have for getting feedback from customers. And one thing that seems fairly obvious when I say it, but it's surprisingly difficult to keep top of mind, is just kind of, it might be tempting to cut off customers when they start talking about something that you're also super passionate and you're also super excited about. And then you can start sharing your own experience, and then you and the customers start relating, and you guys go down that deep, deep rabbit hole of that one specific maybe pain point or experience or something. But it's often much, much more effective as a PM to kind of force yourself to sit back, listen to them, let them finish talking, and then take notes as you go along and dive deep into the various topics. I like to think of it as breadth first search as opposed to depth first search. So you get a far greater breadth of things first, and then you can start poking into various things. But yeah, that's another piece of tips and tricks that I've got for getting feedback. Now, I mentioned support-related conversations before, briefly earlier in this deck, as a means of getting time with customers. If you use a support call as a premise to talking to a customer and get feedback on maybe that specific area, you could potentially throw in a handful of open-ended questions along the way. Again, this kind of goes back to the whole point of always be prepared with stuff that just general content that you can fish around for as a PM for feedback. Obviously, one risk of this is that the customer might think that you're distracting them, but if done tactfully, I think this can really help, establish your credibility with the customer across more than just that specific area, and then also get feedback as a PM. Surveys are a classic way of getting feedback from customers, I think. And I mean, obviously, I've sent my fair share of surveys to customer groups throughout my time at Microsoft. So I'll just share a couple of things to keep in mind as you're doing surveys. Customers have very little time in their hands. I think that's a safe assumption to make. Depending on the survey, you can expect a fairly low response rate, and just be prepared for this. As rates as low as 1% are not uncommon, depending on how you craft your survey and how wide of an audience you send it out to. And the second thing I'll share, keeping with the assumption that customers have very little time, things like long form answers can be difficult to get high quality responses from. So putting that extra thought into the survey creation process and potentially rewording open-ended questions into questions that use radio buttons or checkboxes for multi-select or drop downs or even drag and drop might be more effective to get something from the customer as opposed to asking them to fill out a mini essay in response to a question. So again, this is kind of similar to my point earlier. Just be very conscious of your wording. And another thing I'll share is you can incentivize customers to help bring up the response rates. And obviously one option that exists is, oh yeah, maybe by responding to this survey, you'll be entered in a chance to win some sort of gift card of some sort. But another thing that I've also found that's been effective is just calling out that they have an opportunity or they have the potential to directly influence something, i.e. the roadmap. And if they think that your product helps them solve a problem and they think that they can get an undue amount of influence in helping your product solve their problem even better, then I found that also, it helps incentivize customers to fill out these surveys. They love the prospect of having a large influence over an area of a product. And then I talked about community before. Again, building a customer community is a great kind of investment. It helps increase their engagement with the product. It lowers churn. It greatly increases defensibility of your product. As an example, at Microsoft, it's not uncommon to start up big teams with customers, with groups of customers, so that people can share their feedback in the Teams community. And then there can be group calls that happen with the Teams community, and then PMs can reach out to that kind of self-selected group of people that are already familiar with the product and get info from those users, from those power users, right? Those folks that are familiar with the product. So now I'll share with you guys some example situations from my own work at Microsoft. These are all kind of public-facing products, so you can find these fairly easily. But again, these are any thoughts that I share, these are all my own. So the first thing is the Azure Serial Console. I used to work on the Azure Serial Console, so I was the PM for this. And this, basically the premise of the product allows you to connect to a virtual machine when you might not otherwise be able to connect to it via SSH or RDP or something like that. So at the time, this was a very highly sought after service, especially when we just launched this thing into a private preview. And basically what private preview means is that our engineering team is ready with a product, but we're not ready to fully support it at a global Azure scale yet. So in order to get into the private preview, we had to ask customers to share some info with us, like their subscription ID, so that we know which subscription to enable. Now, we were in a unique situation at this point in time where we knew that we had lots of demand for this product, more demand than we would probably be able to scale up to at that point in time. So as part of the private preview kind of entry survey, we included a bunch of questions, for feedback and requirements and getting customers' thoughts on prioritization. And we made those questions required. So, when they filled out those surveys, not only did we get kind of their customer info and we know which subscriptions to enable, we also got direct feedback on what customers thought of our potential next steps. So they said, oh, is this feature more important than that feature? What would you like more, this or that? And that was really, really good feedback that we took directly into our own kind of planning and prioritization process. So that's one example. Another kind of larger scale survey example would be for Azure Automanage. This is actually the product that I'm working on right now. We sent this to a very, very large audience, this survey, kind of in accordance with Microsoft privacy guidelines and whatnot. And due to the wide-ranging nature of the survey, we did receive a relatively low response rate, where response rate kind of means people actually filling out the survey and hitting submit. So this was expected. We still received a ton of good data, and kind of one of the goals of the survey was actually part of this final sentence here. If you're interested, you'll have the option to engage the product team in a more in-depth conversation. We were looking to do smaller scale calls with interested customers to get more feedback in greater depth. So we got good general data about the service, and then we also got our smaller set of customers that we could have deeper conversations about. So this is great. This provided us a lot of useful feedback. This provided us a ton of, potential for customer relationships and whatnot. But obviously, due to the wide-ranging nature of these surveys, I would say this is an example of a tactic to be used relatively sparingly. Another thing that I do is support reachouts. So I've talked about support a couple times. Here's a hard, concrete example. Sometimes I'll reach out to customers after seeing some onboarding failures from them in our telemetry. And we can say something like, hey, look, you're receiving this email because we saw you had some failures during onboarding. We make an offer to help them out and get their feedback. So, throughout the call, obviously we try to solve their problem, but I also like to stay aware of potential opportunities to fish around for other feedback. Sometimes I'll ask, hey, how do you stay up to date about resource status in the portal? And that's me kind of poking around for feedback on notification and alerting. And then obviously another goal of all this is to build a customer relationship, funnel them into our own product community, and ultimately, drive retention and lower product churn. Now, speaking of kind of our own community, we also run cohort calls within Azure Automanage. So we maintain kind of a little cohort community of customers, and every once in a while, we'll send out a call to all of them, and we share with them some NDA content with roadmap updates and product updates. And we also ask for feedback. So it's a great opportunity to engage with the community and also have the customers feel included. Again, as I've mentioned about community, it's great for defensibility. Customers are more likely to stick around with the product if they feel like they're part of the community. So we think this is a great investment kind of in our own time as PMs. So what do you do after you have all that customer feedback? What can you do with it? I've mentioned this a couple of times. I'll call this out pretty explicitly. You can build relationships with those customers. You can have that dialogue. You reach out to them. You've sought their feedback. You've had a conversation. It's a two-way street now. Keep the conversation going, even beyond the initial reach out. If maybe you can reach out to them later and ask for their thoughts and feedback on something else. You can also obviously kind of consolidate the feedback, look for patterns, look for problems customers are trying to solve, and problems that they're describing, and then try to solve them for the customers. And how do you do that? Well, you write product requirement documents. So, once you've got your feedback, once you've identified your problems to solve, the next step is to formulate all of your thoughts into kind of a more formal PRD, which kind of describes the what and the why and the how of your problem or your product or your service. As a final point, I'll share, within my current team at Microsoft, we actually have a whole OneNote dedicated to customer feedback and that we share with the whole team. So anyone can use it at any time to kind of look into what X customer was saying at which call, and then anyone can contribute to it, and anyone can use it as just a source of data for why we're doing this next thing that we're doing. So in summary, we talked about a few things today. I shared kind of some thoughts on why you should talk to customers, some thoughts on how you can get customers' attention. I shared some tips and tricks for maximizing that feedback from customers, and I gave you a handful of examples from my own work. So with that, I'd like to thank you all for your time today, and hope you all have a great day.